Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar. We're in for the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days. We are going to see some fairly up and down conditions as we do head into the final week of July. We have got this westerly flow that is coming in off the Atlantic, bringing some fresher conditions, but still could see some warm sunshine at times, some showers, but nowhere near overwhelming like they have been at points during July. So really an average sort of end of the month. Temperatures are going to be a few degrees up and down either side of average, and yeah, it's not going to be too much of a remarkable, memorable end to July. However, as we head into the longer range, into early August, starting to see a stronger signal for high pressure to firmly build in. Now, the current signal is for an Azores high to build in, not a European high. And although it both would give fairly dry conditions with lots of sunshine, there is a difference. The European high could encourage more thunderstorms with more unstable flows coming in from the Mediterranean, more humidity associated with those air masses as well. Whereas the Azores high is extending in off the Atlantic, so the air masses aren't going to be quite as hot and humid, coming in from more of a west and southwesterly direction, but will be more stable, less chance of big thunderstorms. So definitely pretty positive developments in the last few runs. Again, we did see a bit of a cut-off low in the past few days, but that has diminished in the model output. This warmer, drier Azores high is definitely starting to sort of come into the model output a lot more, especially today. All three of the main runs are showing it, and it would deliver a warm and dry start to August if it did come off. So do remember, if you enjoy the videos, do like and subscribe. Now, if you start on the live radar, a bit of a mixed theme at the moment, as we had alluded to, a bit cooler and a bit more unsettled further northwards and westwards, closer to lower pressure sat well to our north. Again, we're oscillating either side of high pressure, low pressure at the moment, up and down the country, so we are going to see spells of rain, but also plenty of dry conditions. And you can see at the moment, further southwards is pretty dry, further northwards is a little bit cooler and wetter. Recording this around 8 PM, so it's not too bad this evening in terms of temperatures. Warmest, of course, where it is drier, but even further northwards, it's not too bad at the moment. Now, if you do over to the latest UKV, you can see a few showers quite widespread during this afternoon, but really turning further northwards and westwards through Sunday morning. A little bit more expansive during the early hours of the morning, but by the afternoon, we're just going to see a wide array of showers. Unfortunately, quite a lot more cloud around. So not going to see too much in the way of sunshine, which is a little bit disappointing for a Sunday afternoon, but it should be mostly dry. As we head into Monday, a little bit more in the way of clear skies, but still some clouds and a few odd showers, and progressively into Tuesday, perhaps a little bit more in the way of persistent rain into Tuesday morning as we see a weak weather front passing through. Leaving an array of quite hefty showers, more dominated further south and eastwards, drier further northwards. So again, you see the ebbs and flows in the sort of forecast here. Not always going to be the same spot seeing these showers. It is going to move around. And then as we head into Wednesday, a pretty dry day for most, some sunshine poking through, and finally into Friday, again a bit of a mixed theme with a few showers around. So you see nothing sort of hugely dominating over the next 5 days. Yes, there will be some sunshine, some warmer conditions, but there will also be some cooler days, some thick cloud and some rain. Just really a mixed bag towards the end of this month, and as I said, pretty bang average if we're being honest for the time of year. Now, if you look at the temperatures, they're also going to be oscillating either side of average this afternoon, around the high teens or low 20s, which is, as I said, not too far from average at the time of year. Same for Sunday, a little bit cooler, so maybe more below average. It's got 15 to 22 degrees there into Monday. A little bit warmer, more widely 20 to 24, but again, nothing remarkable. Tuesday, again, a little bit cooler in a few spots with some rain, more towards the mid-teens, but where it is still sunny and warm, 23 to 25. Wednesday, again, could see some 20s in places there. And finally, Thursday, could get a little bit warmer, 25s and 26s. But the temperatures are pretty consistent. They're oscillating either side of average for the time of year, so nothing too remarkable. But if we're being honest, quite a few people will quite enjoy this. Sometimes it gets to high 20s, low 30s, even though it's dry with strong sunshine. It's oppressive, it's a bit uncomfortable sleeping. These sort of conditions, still get out there and enjoy it when it's not raining, still feels warm, still have a t-shirt on, but it's not too oppressive, and it is nice and beautiful out there at times. Now, those sort of warm, dry, sunny conditions that we're going to see at times over the next 5 days could dominate further into early August. Now, if you look at the latest GFS, you can see this westerly flow really well at the moment. The Azores high is sat out to our southwest, low pressure sat towards Iceland, a flat westerly wind coming in off the North Atlantic. That's why we're still seeing showers, but still some dry conditions when we see some small ridges of higher pressure. Now, this sort of pattern is going to continue into next week, not really moving all too much. Again, ebbs and flows in the jet stream, again giving slightly drier and slightly wetter days in there. And progressively into early August, we keep that westerly flow, at least for the first few days. But watch what happens beyond. You see this big area of pink and red. That is an intense area of high pressure. The Azores high. That is moving in. Now again, if we look at the wind direction, it's still west to southwesterly, so we're not seeing heat and humidity from the Mediterranean. So we're not looking at low to mid-30s here. But what we are looking at, potentially, is mid-20s, high 20s, and dry conditions. Now there's a little bit of a breakdown here around the 7th, 8th. Low pressure system clearing through. But it doesn't last too long, and the high pressure does rebound and build back in. So a little bit of a wobble there in the middle of the run here, or towards the back end of sort of the run. But still, majority of the time, that high is dominating, keeping it dry and warm. As I said, if we look at the air mass, it's not too bad, around the 10-degree isotherm. That's mid to high 20s this time of year. Before that northerly flow, it's probably around the low teens at 850 HPA. And again, if we zoom in at the 2 meter temperatures, you can see again that's around the mid 20s, maybe upper 20s in a few spots. So very dry, very warm, and again if we put on precipitation, very minimal precipitation bar a few weather fronts trying to skirt to the north of Scotland. So yeah, pretty optimal conditions there. The only caveat is that brief northerly flow that pushes in for a couple of days around the 7th, 8th of August. Again, we'll keep a close eye on that. It is cropping up in some of the runs, but most of them keep this high pressure building in, looking really quite beautiful. Now, if you look at the latest GM, again, that westerly flow, the next kind of 4 or 5 days, really not doing much. A bit of a northerly flow here, actually, to start August, but it's the same pattern with high pressure to our south and west, low pressure to our north. But towards day 10, we do see that high building in, and no signs of that northerly wind around the 7th or 8th. I know we're not out to the 7th or 8th here. We can't get out to that as it's beyond day 10 here. But no sign of that amplification in the jet stream. Instead, that intense area of high pressure building in right over the top of us, looking really quite pleasant indeed. And again, if we zoom in, you can see it's not a southerly wind. It's more of a west to northwesterly wind. The upper air temperatures are perfectly pleasant, low to mid-teens, which is above average for the time of year, and the 2 meter temperatures would reciprocate here up towards the mid-20s. So again, nothing remarkable, no southerly flow, so no huge and massive heat wave. But what we can say, it is looking warm and it is looking pleasant. This run is actually trying to tap into that hot, humid air across the Mediterranean. But you can see the track has to take out into the Atlantic around the high by the time it gets to us much cooler. Whereas if this high was eastwards, a European high, where the centre of this high was actually over mainland Europe, towards Germany, France, and the Alps, then we would see a southerly or southeasterly flow. That's the hot humidity that we have seen at times this summer. And, of course, would have thunderstorms with it when we see that low bumping in up from the Bay of Biscay or out from the Atlantic. So, yes, it looks very similar to that sort of hot southerly flow, but just because of the subtle difference in positioning, it still delivers a lot of the dry, warm and sunny conditions. It's just not quite as hot, not quite as humid, and doesn't have quite the same thunderstorm risk, which in my eyes is actually a pretty optimum scenario. Now, if you look at the latest ECMWF to finish off, again, we got the same westerly flow, a little bit of that northerly around the 1st of August. So although not around the 7th or 8th like the GFS, it does a little bit earlier here by a week or so, or at least shows that similar flow. It perhaps just shows you there's a chance of seeing a little bit of application to jet. Around day 10 though, very similar to the other runs, that intense high pressure system builds in. Once again, because of its positioning, all that hot and humid air doesn't go our way. It goes out into the Atlantic and around the high. So we do tap into a little bit of that heat. Nothing remarkable though, with most around the low to mid-teens. Again, we'd be looking at mid to high 20s. Now to finish off by looking at the ensembles, you see as well reflected generally, the upper air temperatures hovering in and around average. So although yes, we're looking at this big high pressure system that could give mid to high 20s towards the start of August, it doesn't really reflect in the upper air temperature graph here. And that's because, as I said, it's an Azores high, so the upper air temperatures aren't actually that remarkable. Our mean this time of year is around the 10-degree isotherm, and you can see from most of those runs we just look at, we maybe get to 14 or 15 if we're lucky, which is, hot enough to see high 20s, but it's not deviating that much from average, and that's those runs that are slightly higher here. The one thing that we can note that is as a result of the extension of the Azores highs, the precipitation does drop. It's quite low over the next 5 to 7 days regardless for London, but it drops further into August, and the big one is the sea level pressure, hovering around 1,015, maybe 1,020, but climbing up to 1,025 and 1,030 into early August. Again, symbolic of a big high pressure system sitting slap bang over the top of us. 2 meter temperatures improving a little bit. Again, not massively. It's something that we'll have to sort of touch up nearer the time. And again, it will be all dependent on the exact pressure, exact wind direction, sun, all of those sort of things will factor in to whether it's 23 degrees or 27, 28. But in around that ballpark is what we're looking at. If we look at the latest ECMWF, have a look at the midnight run. It's pretty similar, to be honest. Temperatures hovering around average, but progressively into August, it does look a little bit dry there. Perhaps not as much of an overwhelming signal as the GFS ensembles, but it is still high and dry. And again, if we look at the pressure, hovering around 1,015, 1,020, maybe even dipping down to 1,010 for a time. Longer range though, 1,025, 1,030, looking a much better there as we do progress further into August. So yes, we're not looking at a massive heat wave. There's the risk that if we get the exact right wind direction, we could get towards those heat wave thresholds at times. But what we're looking at is a fine, dry and warm spell into early August as we see high pressure moving in. A sort of classic warm and dry pattern, sort of symbolic of a classic summer's day. Not the extreme heat that we have seen at times this summer, not the extreme heat we've seen in past years, just pleasant heat. It's difficult to kind of explain. We're not looking, as I said, at big oppressive Mediterranean air. We're looking at more average sort of air with strong sun giving pleasant days. It is something we'll keep a very close eye on, as subtle differences can make quite a big difference to what we see at the surface. But yeah, I'll keep you updated on those over the coming days. For the time being though, average temperatures, kind of average conditions with some rain and showers around. Hopefully though, much drier as we head into early August. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.